Okay, so we're back and we are looking at the our knight. And we're trying to figure out how to do the rest of this, right? So there's a few ways we could do this. We could proceed the way that we have in the past where we just kind of like move geometry around and add more edge loops. But we want to do this in a little bit more of a methodical way. So we're going to learn the extrude tool. So the extrude tool is this button right up here at the top of our shelf, or on our shelf here. It's the one that kind of looks a little bit like a skyscraper on a street corner or something being pulled out of a grid. And that's really the best way to think about it, is that like what you do when you extrude. And let's kind of like go to another object here for a minute. I'll create a box. Zoom in on it by pressing the F key. And then in order to use the extrude tool, most of the time you're going to be using it in face mode. And you're going to click on a face, and then you're going to hit the extrude button. And as soon as you hit the extrude button, this little tool pops up, right? And this tool's got a bunch of little buttons on it that you can use if you want. You can click on the word, left click on thickness here, and scrub left and right to make this little thing go up and down. And you can also click on offset here, and you can make it go in and out. And if I have a little bit of extra geometry, you can also pull it in, so you can use a combination of those two things. You can also use divisions here to add more geometry to your extrusion as you go on the fly. And you can also, if we have multiple faces selected, so like let's say I've got these 4 faces selected and I extrude, you can see that I can bring these out and it will extrude them together. But I can also turn this little button at the bottom off that says keep faces together. And what that will do is it will extrude each face individually if that's turned off. Now, there's a lot going on with this tool. And so let's just talk a little bit about what's happening here. So let me create a sphere here, and let's move the sphere out because that might be another useful tool to explain this. All right, so if I've got a face selected and I hit extrude, there's a few other ways you can use this tool. You can see here that we can use the buttons on the actual tool itself. We can also use this other equipment that's kind of on the tool, but let's just hold off on that for a minute. The other way that you can use this that I prefer is, well, actually let's explain a little bit more about how the tool works first. So basically what happens when you hit extrude is Maya creates a bunch of new geometry. So if I grab this ring of faces here and hit extrude, there's actually a bunch of faces now sitting underneath these, or there's a bit of new geometry that's sitting underneath these. And when I pull this out, right, it exposes that. But if this were still set to 0, that doesn't mean that there isn't more geometry sitting underneath here. The easiest way to see this is to hit the 3 key. And you can see that all of a sudden we've got this weird double line here and this little crease that happens. And that's because there's 2 edges now sitting underneath each other. And if I were to grab onto this face and move it, you can see that, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of geometry that's just sitting right underneath that area. So where I just hit that extrude button, it just created a bunch of new geometry. And so you have to be careful when you use the extrude tool that you don't accidentally create a bunch of extra geometry. And this happens all the time. This is probably one of the most common mistakes that students of Maya make, is that they accidentally create a bunch of geometry and then they can't understand what happened to their model. So for example, like let's say I have this face selected here, I hit extrude, and then I accidentally forget, because I was maybe like talking to my friend or something like that, that I hit extrude and I just clicked away. And my model looks the same, and I just go on about my business. And if I hit the 3 key, well, that doesn't look right. And maybe it's a long time before I figured this out. I hit extrude again, accidentally talk to my friend again, select that face, hit extrude again. So now I've hit extrude like 3 or 4 times. And you can see that all of a sudden now we've got a ton of geometry here. We've got a really sharp edge. And all that geometry is sitting on top of itself, right? So you can see we've got a bunch of extra stuff happening here, and this can really get out of hand. You can see that this is not really looking, you know, the way that it should. And so you have to be careful when you use the extrude tool. So basically, when you hit that button to extrude something, you got to commit to it. So just as an FYI there. Okay, so let's start extruding this guy. So what I'm going to do is in my split view here, I'm going to right click, go into face mode, hit my extrude button, and then I'm not going to use this thickness thing. I'm just going to grab my move tool, and I'm just going to grab that new geometry that I just created and pull it out. And you can see there that I can move this however I want. And with that face selected, I can also kind of, the problem is though, and this is where the extruding process is very crucial, is I need to bend this and go all the way around this horse's head. And so this is where we're going to talk about this thing called edge flow. And basically, how do we want to organize the movement of the geometry as it moves around this horse's head? So what I'm going to show you how to do here, this is sort of the proper way to do it. So if we, for example, grab this face, what we want to do is we want the lines in both directions to kind of bend their way around this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this edge or this face a little bit and move it around like that. And what you want is you want this line here to be roughly perpendicular to this line here as you turn. So I'm going to kind of get a little bit more like that. Maybe pull this out a little bit more. And then I'm going to scale this in slightly. I won't worry about the mane of the horse right now. And I could always add a little bit more geometry here if I wanted to. I could add a little bit of a line here. And now, we'll worry about kind of a little bit of this extra information later. Right now we're just trying to get the sort of tube of the horse's head to bend. So then I'm going to grab my extrude tool again. And again, you're trying to get away with as little geometry as possible. And then I'm going to use my scale tool, use the center of the scale tool, kind of move it down like that. And then hit extrude again. Pull this out. Now we need to start turning back in this direction. Now I should have probably, what I could do here is I could also pull this down right here. Maybe scale this. Yeah, I like that a little better. Let me scale that out there. And then let's grab this face again. Sort of move that down. And we're going to start to turn this corner. So you can see how we've got this kind of bend. And now we're going to bend it all the way around. So you kind of, if you follow this line running down the middle here, this should sort of scroll around and point eventually towards the mouth of the horse. So then if we extrude again, so I just hit my move tool there, and then I'm going to rotate that. And the way to think about this turn here is pretend you're sort of slicing a pizza, where each cut goes towards the center of the pizza. And let's extrude again. And let's extrude again. So I'm just using my move tool and then rotating. Oops. And then we're almost there, right? So then we're kind of facing down, right? So you can kind of see how this turn works, right? And let's do it one more time. And then from here, right, I can sort of pull this down this way and maybe something like that. Now, that wasn't so bad, right? Doesn't look a lot like a horse yet, but the important thing is that we've got the basic shape in place, right? We've got the kind of topology where we want it, right? This is something that a primitive couldn't give us, and so we needed to kind of make this ourselves, and we did it with a very low poly geometry, and that's the other key thing here, is we want to keep this low poly, because eventually we're going to add a little bit more detail to this, and as we do, we don't want to add the detail before we need to, because if we do, that means we'll have to move all of that extra geometry around. So again, let's go back to this, and we're going to start to move some of that geometry around to approximate more of that detail. So for example, I'm going to right click now, go into vertex mode, and I'm going to marquee select, meaning I'm just going to click and drag over this group, switch to my move tool, and start to kind of massage some of these extra vertices around here. So I'll move this down, maybe scale this in a little, right? Maybe move this a little bit more towards the edge. And as you're doing this, you can also sort of toggle the 3 key a little bit to see how you're doing and how that smooths out, because ultimately the 3 key is going to help you to kind of, you know, that's pretty much what its final form is going to look like. And so, but the one thing you don't want to do is you don't really want to model with the 3 key on. You just want to use the 3 key to kind of check your work a little bit. And that's all I'm doing right now. So I'm just occasionally kind of flashing back and forth between those two tools, but I'm not letting that rule the day, because the problem with keeping the 3 key on as you model is that you'll think that it looks really good, and then you'll get yourself into trouble. Okay, so we can also start to add a little bit more geometry right now. So I'm just using the multi-cut tool here, holding down the control key and clicking. And I'm just going to add maybe a little bit more here to kind of flesh this out. Maybe a little bit there, right? And I'm going to add more on the face here as well. So then I can kind of grab these, bring them up, grab these, bring them up, grab these, bring them up, and then grab these, kind of bring them down, and then grab these, bring them forward, and then maybe one more loop here, at least for the time being, to add a bit more detail around the chin. And maybe you can just grab this one and kind of pull it back. Okay, so that's not bad for the face. And let's maybe add one more loop here, and I'll just kind of grab these and pull them out to kind of grab that, get a little bit more roundedness on the back. And so that's the extrude tool, right? And basically it allowed us to create a little bit more unorthodox geometry and to kind of move things around. Now, we're going to be dealing a lot more with the extrude tool as the semester goes on. And so if this seemed a little bit intimidating, that's sort of normal right now, and that's okay. But just know that this is the tool you're going to have to probably use more than just about anything else in the entire program. So it's worth getting to know this.